I'd like to welcome everybody. Let's give a round of applause for everyone that put this together. And our great panel. Yes. My name is DJ Avalanche. I want to thank you all for being here. For those that are listening or watching online, we will have the text-to-screen option for questions or anything that you guys have to chime in on. So we will be checking those a little bit and making sure to get those to the panel. First things first, this is Step Up Clackamas, so a big thanks to them. I also want to shout out all of the sponsors for this. That is the Coalition for Communities of Color. It's also sponsored by Clackamas Community College, Clackamas County, and the Campus Compact, as well as partners including Oregon Association of Student Leaders. Next up, Clackamas Education Service District, and Portland United Against Hate. Once again, let's give them all a round of applause, please. So we're going to cut right to things. I'd like to introduce to you guys Casey Layton. We are honored to be joined by Casey Layton, Chief Equity Officer of Clackamas Community College, here to share a few words as being our student panel. Casey and everyone involved from Clackamas Community College have been a wonderful partner in making this event. So please join me in welcoming Casey Layton, please.
I forgot to give Gordon my theme music. Yeah. And I was gonna come into Bad Mama Jamma, but you played it earlier, so I was like, all right, I'm good. Casey Layton here, she, her pronouns. So excited to be here with you all today. If you didn't see me earlier, I love to dance. I enjoy being around people, and I love building relationship. And I feel like today, that's what this is all about. It's about building community. It's about listening to the now, the here and now, which are this wonderful group of folks that's sitting at these tables. I'm excited to hear their stories. Step Up Clackamas is all about amplifying voices. At least that's what I remember us talking about as we did the planning. And so what I want to tell to the youth that are here is please never be silenced, ever. Many of you are here because you are kind of already comfortable speaking up and using your voice. And as someone else who likes to use my voice to support and talk about the things that I'm passionate about, I know that sometimes people will want to silence you. And it's challenging to get through some of those moments, but today is not that day. But as you continue on in your journey, I would love for you to try to figure out how to help amplify folks' voices that are softer than yours. Like, how do you help create space for those who have a softer voice, but have a story to tell as well? So utilizing your strength to make room for others. So that's for you all. And then for us here in the audience, which I believe that most folks here are either connected to youth in some way, or connected to students or community. And on a day like today, we want to listen. There's so much for us to learn. I know my husband would probably say that I think that I know everything, but he's not here right now, those of you who know my spouse. But the thing is I don't know everything. I might be confident sometimes. Many of you are very confident in your expertise and your lived experiences, but we can learn so much from one another. And so on a day like today where people are going to be vulnerable and they're going to be sharing their voice, how can we listen? How do we help amplify their voice? Where do you have a strength that you can take the stories that we hear today and share them out loud? How do we get people to start to listen? I think Kat Long is the president of our faculty association. Did I get that right, Kat? Yes. Kat there was a hearing earlier today at Portland Community College where folks were showing up to give testimony to some of our state legislators to say, we need help financially to help keep programs like this going. And I know that was an opportunity to amplify voices. How do we get the legislators and the lawmakers to hear what it is that we're talking about as well, so that we can get, hearts and minds do make a lot of things happen, but we also need financial resources, so let's just be real about that. So for those of you that are listening, Coalition of Communities of Color, I think does take donations, and so does Clackamas Community College Foundation. Just a little plug there for that. But thanks again for being here today. I'm very excited to represent the college at this organization. My position is a newer position, and we're still trying to figure out all the different ways in which to help build relationship in the community. But we moments like this and days like today, I get to see it happen. I mean, I feel like I sweated out my blowout quite a bit during the dance session with with all of you, and it was worth every BDB that might be coming up here in the back or here in the front. So thank you so much for that. And you're with me? You're with me? Okay. Well, I know we're going to we're going to get started. Enough hearing from me. Do you need the mic after me? Okay. We're going to hear the testing. Okay. The students are going to introduce themselves. But before they come up and do their introductions, I'm going to turn it over to Andres, who works for Coalition of Communities of Color. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
I just wanted to say hello real quick and also ask someone to say a few words. Representative Nessa Hartman is here with us today, and she has a representative here in Clackamas and has been part of our steering committee. We have students here who are on our student steering committee who led this event and through this event, and we also have a group of BIPOC adults, and she's one of our members. And also Tori, who is here, is also one of our members, and a few other folks who have been working with us for the last year to support research justice. So I just want to pass it to Rep. Hartman for a minute so she can say just a few words.
Thank you for allowing me to take some time to say something. I'm Vanessa Hartman, I use she, her pronouns. I am the newly elected state representative for House District 40. Right here. And I am just so incredibly excited to see all of the work that has been done, to see you all sitting up here. I culturally identify as Indigenous and been the third Native American person to serve in the legislature. And I say that because it is so important for you all to own who you are in spaces where we're not supposed to be. We were not supposed to be in these spaces. And finally, we're having this moment where we are. And it is so important to be vulnerable. I have done all of this like as an open book. I think there's probably people out here that I've never met that probably know my whole life story. So it is important to just lean into that. Don't be afraid, don't be silenced. As Casey has mentioned, that is the thing that has been, put upon our people for a very long time. And so really just like lead in and step into those things. And I think another important part is, this time 3 years ago, I wanted nothing to do with politics and politicians because I didn't think that they would actually hear me or listen to me or care about my concerns. And now that I'm here, it is an incredibly important part of my time at the legislature to make sure that we're amplifying your voices. Because when I was your age, I didn't think anyone cared about what I had to say. And now we have people, I'm 35 years young, but when I was your age, I thought that was really old. And so now I'm here as the old person. My office is dedicated, what I really wanted to share is that we are starting a school tour, or we're working on starting a school tour of all the schools that are in our district to create a youth advisory coalition with the goal that we pass a legislation that you all can agree on and that we can bring you all to the table and really empower your leadership. And then one of you can take my job one day, okay? I'm gonna let you. You guys think? I heard you're the senior class president, or yeah. You can say it, yeah. I mean, because I was. So just think, I was senior class president 2006. Gave up on politics, and then came back a long time ago. So just know that it is possible. Your voice matters. You deserve to be here, and you deserve to share what your voice is. So I'm so proud of you all, even though I don't know you, but I'm so excited to see this, and really am honored to be your state representative. So thank you so much.
All right, at this time, let's go ahead and get into our introductions. And before we do, I want to say, first and foremost, great pictures. I love it. You can keep them coming. You can also send your questions straight up to the screen, so it takes both picture and text. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our left and go all the way over to the right.
Hi guys, my name is Isabel Rexa Pearl. I'll be emceeing this panel and facilitating. I'm gonna go on a quick introduction. I culturally identify as Indonesian. She, her pronouns, 18 years old. For those who don't know me, I do some work with organizations local to Oregon, working with CCC, but I also work as Vice President of Equity at our high school. I'm involved with Next Up and also Oregon Health Equity Alliance. It's a couple. Yeah. Thank you. Well, so we, as Andres talked about, we started this project like a year ago, and it's kind of crazy to see it come to life. But something I really wanted to have was a panel, because it's like the best way to showcase experiences. So a little bit on how this panel is going to work. We're first going to have our panelists share some experiences, but on there you can also react with messages, or pictures, or text, responding to the panelists, and so it feels like, a really nice discussion here. And with that, we'll be talking about experiences here in Clackamas County, and thank you for being here. It really means a lot. And we're excited to be able to share our stories today. All right, I'll start it off. Aiden, would you like to begin?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, my name is Aiden. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm Chinese. And yeah, I go to Clackamas High School, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
It's okay.
Hi, did I turn it on? It's
Yeah,
on,
you did.
yes, haha. Okay, hi, my name's Samantha Hubbard. I'm 18, my pronouns is she, her. I'm half white, half black, and I go to Clackamas High School as well.
Okay, I'm Amaya Peralta. I identify with she, her pronouns. I am Mexican and white, so I'm half of those. I go to Sandy High School. I run Students Advocating for Equality that's prevalent in Sandy and surrounding areas. I've been working with the CCC for the last year now. And then I also sat on a youth advisory council for the city of Sandy on their comprehensive plan for 2050. And that is it for me.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, my name is Rafi Bulaklak. My pronouns are he, him. I live in Happy Valley, Clackamas County. I identify as Filipino, and I am gay. Just want to get that out there. An important thing to me when I introduce myself, my last name is Bulaklak. In Tagalog, it directly translates to flower. And I think that is a great portrayal of me as a person. I'll write it, I'll pass it on.
Hi, my name is Rainy.
Is it on?
I turned it off. Is it still not working? Okay, it's fine. My name is Rainy. I live in Happy Valley as well, and I also go to Clackamas High School. I identify.
Should I start over? My name is Rainy Chan. I go by she, her. I live in Happy Valley and go to Clackamas High School. I moved here 2-3 years ago, and I used to live in a small town called Seaside. If anybody has ever been there, popular vacation spot. And I am pansexual to everyone but my parents. And yeah, that's me.
I have a mic, thank you. My name is Lydia Nguyen. I am 15. I am a sophomore also at Clackamas High School. I am an officer on my school's Asian Infinity Club and president of my school's green team. I am Vietnamese, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I never thought that I would attend this sort of event. In some ways, I feel like I'm inexperienced because I'm not part of an organization. I don't partner with local committees. I don't do all those type of things, but I am a teenager and I am just a kid, and I spend a little bit too much money on clothes, and I just, yeah. But I love talking and I love sharing my experiences. And if it wasn't for Isabel who gave me this opportunity, I was just talking about my experiences, and she's like, hey, do you want to come speak at this panel? And I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm not really that type of person, And she's like, no, just come, just try it out. And so I'm here, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So.
Okay, so the first thing we'll be talking about in this panel is talking about our family history, how we came here, what's our lived experience. So, who wants to start off? What? Yeah.
Okay, I can start off. So I'll start off by saying I've lived in Clackamas County, specifically Sandy, for the entirety of my life, a good 18 years. My grandpa is a Mexican immigrant. He was a field worker. We had issues with citizenship, and he was deported way before I was even born. And that has really affected me and how I view my community and my identity. I grew up in a mixed home, and growing up with one parent being white and one parent being Hispanic definitely changes how you live your life, and it can make you struggle with your identity at some point when one parent doesn't understand that part of you. And I felt like that was important to me and my story being here, as well as my aunt Feliciana also works in equity at a college level. She's a professor, and she has kind of loved and encouraged and supported me in every way, and that's kind of how I've come here. Oh yeah, that's it for me. Rafi, do you want to go?
So I was a menopause baby. My mom had me at like 46, and at the time, and even until now, she is a restaurateur at heart. But having a baby meant that she had to stop these things, stop her passion. So for the first 5 years, I was born in Chicago and we moved to Clackamas County. And I spent another 5 years here until I was 10 years old, until my mom finally told me, Rafi, we're gonna go back to the Philippines. Owning a restaurant, cooking food, serving food, that is my passion. And currently I can't do that here in Oregon. So we went back to the Philippines for around 5 years. And there I discovered who I was as a person. And I lived my life in intervals of 5 years. 5 in Chicago, 5 Clackamas, 5 Philippines, and then I hope to follow another 5 right now. But I moved from the Philippines around 2 years ago. But the unfortunate incident that occurred was the pandemic just happened. It was always a plan that I was gonna come back, but unfortunately, it's just me who flew back. There are 7,000 kilometers that separates me from my mother, my father, my whole entire family. And though it has been hard to cope with these things, whether it's academically, from a familial perspective, or even providing a means for my own living, it has shaped my identity in a way that I feel like I can give perspective onto issues that are pertinent to these kinds of conversations. And that's why I am so grateful to be here today.
Okay, Sam, are you ready? Yeah.
Oh, I think my mic is working. Yeah, thank you though. Okay, so my dad grew up in New York. He's Black, and he lived there until he was 16 and then flew alone across the country to California where he met my mom. She was born in Ohio and then moved to, I think, California when she was like maybe 1, so she doesn't remember like her life in Ohio at all. And she grew up on a farm in California, and then years later passed, my mom and my dad, they got married, they had a kid, and then they moved to Portland, they had 2 more kids, so I have 3 brothers. And then we moved to Clackamas because I saw all these teachers moving to Clackamas, and they were like, hey, if all the teachers are moving here, you might want to take my kids there. And so my dad grew up in not a great situation, having to move across the country at 16 with nothing because his luggage got lost when he flew, so all of his things were gone. And he moved in, I want to say with my aunt, but he was basically on his own. Like, he lived with her, but like not really. And he got his first job when he was 9, and he's been working ever since. And so I think that shaped a lot of the way that he brought up me and my brothers. And then I grew up in Clackamas. I've lived here my entire life. I live across the street from Clackamas High School, so me and all of my brothers filtered through there. And it's been a lot. I think that I can agree with like growing up in a mixed family when you have a mom who's white that doesn't quite understand like the Black perspective, and then a dad who's Black that doesn't quite understand the white perspective, especially as someone who is fairly like racially ambiguous is a word that I've heard a lot growing up. No one knows what I am. And it's kind of nice at times, but also people will make a lot of assumptions about me, and then I'll just be like, yeah, like, I don't know, like, I don't, that's not who I am, but I'm glad you think that. Like, I don't really know what to say to that growing up. And I was met with a lot of confusion, which I think made me really confused, because I never really identified myself as someone who was Black, because no one ever viewed me as that or ever referred to me as that, unless it was derogatory. So then I wanted to push myself away from that part of my identity. because I didn't like the fact that all I had ever heard was a negative thing growing up in a very white community. But I think that as I've gotten older and I've joined things like my school's Black Student Union, I've learned to reconnect with my Black heritage and feeling a lot more comfortable just to talk about it, and then also finding people like on this panel that understand that growing up in Clackamas, although has a lot of privileges, can be kind of tough. So just getting people to talk to and having a space where you can share your voice, I think has helped a lot.
Lydia?
So both of my parents are immigrant. My mom was 1 out of 10 children, and my dad was an only child. His parents, my grandpa got sent off, so my dad's dad got sent off to prison. And so he grew up without a father, and his mom was forced into a marriage with my dad, with my grandpa, which was an arranged marriage. And so she grew up neglecting my dad, and so my dad had a really rough childhood. And my mom, she was like the typical Vietnamese, like she's a farmer, she didn't have much, and they both made it to America in their late teens. And they both lived in the David Douglas district, but because they got here in their late teens, they never got to live out their youth. And it took them a while to get here. It took them basically their whole childhood to get to America. And so they never really got that childhood, and I think that influenced the way that they raised me and my children. Not my children, my siblings. Me and my siblings, because they've never put any pressure on us to grow up too fast, and it's different. And sharing my experiences being a second-generation Asian American, you hear about how your parents put expectations on you to become this doctor or to grow up too fast. But if anything, my parents just wanted me to enjoy my youth. So I felt like that experience is worth sharing. But they moved here and they lived in the David Douglas School District. And they worked really hard. They saved up and then they got married. And they made it a point to not get married until they were financially ready in order to move to Clackamas County. It was always their goal to raise children here. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the privilege that comes with being in Clackamas County, because this is where they decided to live out their American dream, to own a house, to have kids, to make sure that their kids grew up successful. And so they just thought that I would have better chances of that, going to schools like Happy Valley Middle School and Clackamas High School. And yeah.
Ready? You ready? Is it working? Is it?
Yes.
Oh. Maybe not. Oh, okay. So when my dad was around 18 or 19, him and his brother and 2 friends came over to America, and let's just say they lived under the radar for a bit, if you catch my drift. And they already had some family in Portland, and this was during the time where, I believe it was during the time where there was like the Chinese Exclusion Act and stuff like that. And so they stopped letting immigrants in America, so that's the reason why they had to live under the radar for a bit. But through the help and support of others, they were able to gain citizenship. And my dad decided to move, like I said earlier, he moved to a small town called Seaside, where he bought a small restaurant named Riley's, and he married my mom back in China, and they moved together. And I lived in Seaside for most of my life, and it's very white predominantly, and there was only one other Asian girl in my class, I remember, because we're best friends now. And I remember just like my teachers confusing us, even though we looked nothing alike. And I think that really formed my experience of how I view myself and how I feel about my cultural identity. Living up in a small town like that, I faced a lot of microaggressions, and it was just hard at times because I felt like I didn't really belong at my school and there was not really a place for me. So I think living in Clackamas County has really helped me feel better about living in my own skin and feeling welcome in my community. And although there were some, I know there are some problems that we need to fix. I mean, it could always be improved, but I definitely think that Clackamas County is a big step from where I used to live, so yeah.
All right, Aiden?
Yeah, I was born in Canada near University of Waterloo, actually. But my parents grew up in the Cultural Revolution of China. And to put that in perspective, during the 1960 period when Mao Zedong was the chairman. For your birthdays, you got one bowl of rice. And like, probably when we were at lunch, everyone like got like a couple scoops of rice. One scoop of rice is what you got for your birthdays. And Spam was like literally the godsend. Like, Jesus has come down and like just gave you Spam. That was what it was like. Yeah, and so my parents took a more traditional route. My dad was the 1,000th PhD in China at the time. And so he got a educational scholarship to come to the United States. And so yeah, I grew up hearing those stories, and so I've always had this sort of guilt in terms of not ever living through those struggles. And so through that guilt, they exploit that and push me to work really hard to do stuff like education, right? But one thing that really stood out to me was I got my Social Security just a year ago, and so living on H-1B is really, if you don't know H-1B, it's like a work visa, and living on H-1B is really scary because anytime you lose your job, like right now or in 2007, when my mom and dad both lost their jobs, it's really scary because you have 6 weeks to get a new job, and it's like else you just get kicked out of the country and you need to reapply. It's so yeah, it's hard, but it's you know what? I like Clackamas. It's awesome. At least from my perspective, I've had a more accepting experience. So I found my own friend groups here, and I found that I've been more accepted here. So yeah, thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you to our panelists for sharing. So I'm gonna give a minute for everyone to really let that sit and process. But we really have a diverse group of voices here, and they all have very different experiences and perspectives on what they think Clackamas County is. So as we go on, our next question will be talking about what does the audience, what do the adults need to know about our experience at Clackamas County? So we'll be recounting experiences or thoughts or things we've seen at Clackamas that we know are not okay, or maybe a little bit more than that. So again, thank you for honoring our panelists, and I'll open it up to whoever wants to go first. Okay, Rafi.
The only kind of reason that I want to start this discussion is because mine is very broad and holistic. What I have labeled as the top of this is further action. Now, I can probably 100% confidently say that everyone in this room has contributed greatly to the progression of Clackamas County. Applause to you all. But what I will say is that I believe today, yesterday, and in the future, there should never be a time where we become stagnant, that we should be complacent with all the work that we are doing. Now, few perspectives from a parent, all right? As parents now, not speaking from experience, as parents, there's so much we can do to be supportive of our children. That's one perspective. Whether it's them pursuing some career that may not be in coordinates with what you envision, their identity sexually or their gender, anything. We should never place ourselves, just because we accept our child for one thing, does not mean that we can say, I've done enough. You know what I mean? And that's from the perspective of a parent. We can move on to school districts. I remember our mental health committee, or our equity committee in our student council went to the Capitol and advocated for more mental health resources. We have a handful of staff at our school that assist students with problems regarding their home lives, things to just get them mentally stable to the point that they can perform well in an academic setting. We can acknowledge that this is an amazing resource. Coming from the Philippines, I never even heard of that. In a school, they wanted you to come at 7:30, leave at 5, go home, do your homework, come in the next day. Students there were burnt out. Having these opportunities, having these outlets are amazing. But what we need to realize is that everything we have right now, this generation of students right here, we have, not to be disgraceful with my vernacular, but we have the bare minimum. What we have right now is a foundation. And we recognize that. We enjoy that we do have these resources, but we are hoping, we are praying that in a few decades, that what we have now, the seeds that the many adults here have planted, will grow into beautiful fruits that can truly create an equitable Clackamas County from every single perspective. Whether you are a parent, whether you are a school advisor, whether you are a politician creating laws, regulating specific things, from every single facet of our community, there is much that can be done. And we are grateful that we do live a life of splendor, that we can express things the way we can, that we can do things that high schoolers 10, 20 years ago weren't able to do. But there are still boundaries. Now, maybe it's too idyllic to say that we want all these boundaries removed, that we want all these walls broken down. But what we have to realize is that from the steps to attaining that perfect, equitable future, we are probably at the bottom ring. There's so much we can do. I'm not undermining any efforts of any teacher, parent, politician, or someone that does laws. I don't know that type of jargon. We're not undermining that whatsoever. But this is a plea that we need more. That may not come in our lifetimes, but that's not why we're here, to see change in our high school careers. I feel like I speak on behalf of everyone here that we are not fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for the small babies that we see here today, for the toddlers, the people that will soon become high schoolers, that will go to college. We are fighting for their life, for their future. And we may not see it today, but we are fighting for it.
We did have a question that came in on the screen. That question is, what is it about living in Clackamas County that makes it a privilege to live here, and why do you believe that your families wanted to be here?
Should I take the question?
I mean, I think our panelists already answered that in talking about their history. Like, if we really think about it, like, Clackamas County has a lot of privilege. There's a reason why some of our parents aspire to live here. And little birdie told me it has to do a lot with race. There's a very predominant race in our county. And it's not one that's reflected in a minority of our students. And that very reason is why a lot of different counties in the US are a little bit more celebrated. And I think our panel is very much a testament to that. To say, like, hey, why is this county a better county because it's not dominated by people of color? But another thing I'd like to add for the legislators here, our mental health foundation, at our schools, we have one full-time counselor for about 1,600 students. And the Princeton Review states that 1 in 4 teenagers experience some sort of mental health crisis. So if we take that into account, okay, 1,600 divided by 4 grades, about 400. There's about 400 students that are, suffering through mental health, and one full-time person to handle all of that. And let's, add a couple more, maybe a couple 50, 100 because of the pandemic, because of all other kinds of things. So, you think one adult can handle 40 kids in classroom? Okay. Take that times 10. Okay. So, anyway. Lydia, would you like to go?
Going back to that question about why, what makes Clackamas so privileged, I don't think people understand how great it is to live in Clackamas unless you've been somewhere else. I was born in Clackamas, but I grew up mostly in the David Douglas School District, but because my parents would go to work, so I'd go over to my grandma's house, and she lived in the David Douglas School District. I spent a lot of time with my cousins and my cousins' friends who are also from that district, and I can't go out and go on a walk in that neighborhood, not the same way I can do in my neighborhood. I can't go on a run if I want to, and I think that's really important to acknowledge. And even now that I'm older and in high school, like, we have a student health mental center, like mental health center at Clackamas. That's not really something that my cousins have, and that's not something that they can relate to. And it's really important that they have those things and those small changes and those small day-to-day activities. And like, I know for me, I go on a walk every time I'm overwhelmed and stressed, and that's not something that I could do if I lived in the David Douglas School District, because whenever I go over there, my parents always tell me not to wander too far, because you don't know what's going to happen there, and there's a large homeless population there that Clackamas doesn't really have, especially where I live. So that's what I want to touch on.
All right, Rainey? And I just like to mention, it's not just like the safety aspect, but it's just opportunity. Like, I have friends in other districts where they don't even have AP classes available, and it's just like simple things like that where we take for granted, where I can just take AP psychology if I want to, and like my other friends in other districts cannot. It's just opportunity. I think that's a privilege.
Yeah. Yes. So, just to refresh, the original question is, what is
What you want adults to know about your experience.
experience?
Yeah, okay. Rafi basically said anything I could ever think of and more, but I really talked about like not being complacent, which again, you stated very well, but not being complacent, especially with teachers in schools. I go to Sandy, there have been quite a few incidents where there has been racism and bigotry from student to student, and that is almost always swept under the rug. Almost like it is constantly swept under the rug, and even if, as someone who has dealt with things like that and also had people come to me for support, I've reached out to our schools, I've reached out to our superintendent, and there still hasn't been anything that's done. They're like, oh, we don't condone it, but not condoning it doesn't mean that they're preventing it, educating, or changing it. And that's kind of.
Thank you, Aya. Okay. Sam, you ready?
Okay, I think I turned, yes, it's on, okay. I guess something I want to touch on, which has kind of been touched on a little bit, but I just want to be a little bit more specific. So, like I said, all of my brothers all went to Clackamas High School, and something that I noticed as like growing up and like watching them all come home and talk about what's happening in schools, that all of them were picked on for being mixed, specifically for being black. And like I remember one time my brother came home and told me that all the kids were calling him Tituba, which if you don't know who that is in the Crucible, that is a slave in the book. And which like, how kids were coming up with that, I don't know, that's insane. But it was just the fact that he'd come home and he'd just say like kids were saying things like that to him. And then when I got to high school, I was like, okay, well that happened to him, but I don't know if it's gonna happen to me. And then it did. It happened a lot, especially last year. There was one student in particular that just kept saying slurs and saying really offensive things and microaggressions. And whenever I talked to him about it, he was like, oh, well, it's just a joke. Like, I don't mean it. Like, you know I don't mean it. And I was like, okay, well, it still hurts. And I went to, I want to say like 4 different teachers and people in positions of power, and nothing's happened. And the one thing that I kept getting met with was, our hands are tied. There's nothing that we can do to help you. And that was a really discouraging thing for me to experience over and over and over again. Because I feel like in so many other instances when it comes to school, like if you get hurt, they tell you to go to the nurse. Or if you're struggling in classes, you go to your teacher or to your counselor. But for some reason, when it comes to racism, we don't have any systems in place for students to go to. It took me going to so many different teachers before they were able to tell me who in faculty I could talk to. And even then, they had a conversation with that person, and they continue to say these things, and nothing's happened. And that was something that was just really discouraging, is because now there are spaces in school where I don't feel safe or feel welcome in, because I don't know if he's continuing to say those things behind closed doors. And the people that he's around and he's surrounded with, if he's saying those things, then they think it's okay for them to say them, and it continues and continues to spread. And every day I go to school and I hear about, there was an incident just a couple months ago where our BSU was walking in the halls and a student called them monkeys in front of a faculty member, and nothing happened. And it's things like that where most people didn't even know about it because no one talked about it. But all of those kids were just constantly met with, there's nothing we can do. And I feel like Rafi was saying, we can't be complacent. We need to put rules in place to protect our students of color. Because I don't think that it's fair to continue to say that you just have to deal with it and you just have to find other ways around it. Because why is it that in every other instance we have some sort of protocol in place, but when it comes to protecting our students of color, suddenly all the resources are gone? So I never want to have another kid go to somebody and take that big leap of faith, because it's terrifying to open up and talk about how much that hurts and then just be told there's nothing we can do, especially when it's a continuing issue. We have to do better.
Yeah, and I really think that if we're the outspoken kids and the kids who are willing to sit in front of a panel and talk to you about all of this, what does it say for other students who may not have that same courage? So, okay. Rainy, you go next? Okay.
So just a question, what do adults need to know about my experience? I think it's just like speaking in the aspect of Clackamas High School, but it can be like teachers or parents, just like the way adults react and what they say and how they handle issues, it matters because they set a precedent for how the kids will react and how they feel and what they think is okay. Like, I feel like you guys covered it pretty well, but there was an incident at Clackamas High School like 2 to 3 years ago. Just for a little background information, our ex-principal was Mexican, and there was a senior prank that happened where they vandalized the front of our school and put refried beans all over our front door and put Trump stickers on the front door, and this was their senior prank. And nothing was done. People were scared to label it as a hate crime, but that is what it was. That was a hate crime. And these students, we know who they are. They posted on social media. We know who they are, but nothing was done. They were allowed to walk at graduation. Nothing was done. And I think this really set a precedent and showed the students, hey, you can get away with this. This is what you can do at Clackamas High School, and you'll be fine. And I think it's really important for people, because the reason why it got swept under the rug was because of parents and teachers who were saying it was just a senior prank. It wasn't that serious. But I think it is up to adults to not be a bystander, not to be complacent and be like, this is not right. And they need to have consequences for their actions. So I think the biggest thing is, like they said, just not be complacent. Don't be a bystander, whether you're just a parent or like a teacher or anything.
Yeah. And a really big issue in that incident was that white teachers didn't know how to handle a hate crime. That's the bare thing. When you're white, you don't have to think about, oh, what happens if someone hate crimes me? What happens if there's slurs written in front of the school? The only thing that they did was hide it. And the reason why we couldn't get the police involved was because we had white teachers clean up any evidence of the crime. The reason why that crime got swept under the rug was because they simply could not withstand the wrath of white parents in Clackamas. That is the reason. If we can't stand up for our students of color, if we can't stand up for our teachers of color, well, let me tell you, there's a very big reason why our teachers of color are leaving in droves. Okay. Yeah. Ready?
Yeah, and just stemming off the idea of education, I think technology access is fundamentally important for that. It's basically the barrier between inequality. If you look at the Bay Area, kids have access to Chromebooks, laptops, computers, everywhere. Like, technology is prevalent because they are rich, they have lots of income, and that access perpetuates that income disparity. If you look I'm like one of the only people who's majoring in CS, like, actually this year in my grade. So it's like, it's crazy to see. And even Clackamas, we see as more privileged or more like higher income compared to the rest of Oregon. Imagine if there are only a couple CS grads out of Clackamas, imagine how much come out of Oregon. And so, computer science graduate, yeah, and like, with the developments of ChatGPT and these new technologies, technology will be fundamentally important to our lives. It's fundamentally important. And similarly, it's fundamentally important for future income or future livelihoods. And so, yeah, I think just stemming off this point, one of the privileges Clackamas has is access to technology, but it simply isn't enough because not only does Clackamas doesn't have enough, but also the rest of the world.
Yeah, and another thing to add before we move into a question from DJ Avalanche, but we're experiencing Chromebook rollback programs actually. Not only that, but we're experiencing rollback on so many different foundations. So as we sit through the next question, I'd like to ask you guys to think, why are we taking more away from our students? So one question that was put up on the board is, what are improvements, and we'll open this up to the audience and the panelists, what are improvements that you first think of when you think, what can we do to better Clackamas community? I'd like to open this up to the panelists real quick.
I had something to add kind of like what we were just talking about. I don't mean to go back. Is that okay?
It's okay. Yeah.
We were talking about schools mostly, and it made me think about how I want to say there is a singular teacher of color at CDI school, and it's my Spanish teacher. There have been a few that have come like the last few years. They have all left. I want to say in the time that I've been there have been at least 2 counselors and 1 science teacher who have left within a year or 2 of being at the high school. And my science teacher, Mr. Montano, has been the only one who stayed. And if I can like name them off of my hands, then that's a problem. I just wanted to add that really quick.
Oh yeah, that's an improvement that needs to be made in Clackamas County. BIPOC teacher retention? Yeah. Well, do any of you guys have anything else to add? If not, we'll move on.
Actually, I didn't get to share my experience, but actually it's okay. It goes along with what I think we can do to better the Clackamas County, like the community. But my experience was after COVID, I was dealing with a lot of like just mental health struggles, and a lot of it was just conflict at home and my personal values. I was really burnt out at school, and I couldn't seem to communicate that with my parents, and I was experiencing the repercussions of like generational trauma. And you hear your teachers talking about it all the time, but whenever they're talking about it in class, it doesn't seem as if it's coming from a place of empathy, but almost as a place as like, oh, the admin made me talk about it, like I'm required to talk about it. Or whenever we're talking about mental health resources, it's as if it's part of the curriculum and it's like just part of their job, and it's not as if they really care. And there's a lot of teachers at Clackamas that genuinely do care, and it really means a lot. But you hear about those things, and then they plant those seeds in your brain. And then when I was going through that time, I just remember those conversations that we had in class when those counselors came in. They're like, hey, if you ever need anything, stop by my office. And so I was at a place where I just couldn't wake up anymore. Like, going to school is really hard, but I put on this facade, and I was just like, everything's fine. And I've never been one to be very open or vulnerable around my friends, so I didn't talk to my friends about it. And so I thought that the school counselor was a good place to go to. And the first year that I went, I thought that I was being too sensitive and that my struggles weren't valid, so I had trouble validating my own feelings. And my counselor, she was Hispanic, and although she wasn't Asian and she didn't understand exactly the same cultural values that my family had, she was able to relate in a way. But then she left, and I got placed with a part-time school counselor, and she was really sweet. But she had so many other students. It was really hard seeing her. She was only there Tuesdays and Thursdays, and as a student, I was involved in extracurricular activities, and those involved meetings, and so it was really hard to coordinate my schedule with hers. And so I would only be allowed to see her 30-minute increments and for intervals. And when I was in her office, she kept glancing at her watch because she had a next student in line. And with 30 minutes, I wasn't able to talk about what I was going through or why I was feeling burnt out or just focusing on my emotions. I was busy explaining why it mattered my parents cared so much. And whenever I was talking about my own personal values and my identity, or she was trying to make analogies to how I felt, or trying to elaborate, like doing what a normal therapist does, because that's what I was receiving, like school counseling. She transitioned into my therapist, so I tried to go like bi-monthly or like bi-monthly because that's all we could do. And so sitting there, I was trying to explain why my parents thought the way that they did, and I think that if there was a greater emphasis on just educating staff and faculty or incorporating like a culture training so that there would be more empathy in between, like a lot of the common themes and patterns that I heard was there was a lack of empathy and understanding, and they weren't able to relate to our experiences, therefore they weren't able to address our needs properly. And so it was really hard, and I think sorry, I lost my train of thought. But it was hard trying to explain myself, and I was sitting there for like 20 minutes of my time just explaining, and she was making analogies on how I felt, but she was kind of pushing me into this narrative that she had of Asians. It was everything that she's talking about, she's comparing, it was as if I was just a model minority and I was a stereotype, and it wasn't, and that's not her fault. She was a great person. It's just that she was going off a stereotype, and that she was saying that I cared too much about my grades and that my anxiety was just because of my test, when it wasn't because of my test. I was able to take my test just fine, but she made it seem as though my whole life revolved around school when it didn't. And so I think it's really important that we just have there's more significance behind just having more cultural-based training for teachers.
Cultural sensitivity is a really, really big thing. And I think that if we are going to have better BIPOC teacher retention, we need to start with being more culturally sensitive, because we are all not a stereotype. That I'd like to pass it on to Ryan.
I thought long and hard about this question over the course of the school year, and I feel like a way to better maybe the Clackamas County school system at least is to make education more accessible and to frame it in a more accessible light. What do I mean by this? I mean, from a high schooler perspective, what is the one goal to reach, like at the end of the 4 years? Graduate in, go to college, you know what I mean? What does that require of you? Extracurriculars, probably AP classes if you want to aim high. But what I've noticed in my school environment as an independent student, I talked to a lot of people who were like me, who had to work to provide for their families, who had to take care of their siblings, be a second parent to their mother. It's almost as if there's a fear of trying to chase after that light at the end of the tunnel, which is a higher college education. Now, since I was exposed to a lot of these students, I know for a fact that there are students who may not have the time to take AP classes, who may not have the time to take extremely rigorous extracurriculars, but have the potential, that have the wits, and there are few things stopping them. But the things that are stopping them are institutionalized. Whether it's a fear because they are not, a model minority, or they're not white. You know, a lot of the times Asian people or white people are expected to take AP classes. Maybe for them it was just a given, but for other people who I've spoken to, they've always thought, oh, AP classes, they're not made for people like me. Oh, that's not an environment I would thrive in. First and foremost, we need to get rid of this stigma okay? Because why are we in high school? We want to make careers for ourselves. We want brilliant futures, okay? Dreaming should not come at a price. Dreaming should be free. If I want to dream my freshman year of, oh, I want to get into NYU, which I do, but I didn't get accepted, but that doesn't matter. If someone wants to dream, yeah. If someone wants to aspire that high, regardless of their familial disposition, their financial situation, nothing should stop them. First of all, get rid of that AP stigma, get rid of the advanced classes stigma, because anyone can do these classes as long as they're taught and nourished to do so. And secondly, we need to make extracurriculars more accessible. Coming to mind like theater productions. I don't have a ride to pick me up every day after school at 6 p.m. and so many other students don't. But what if it's not theater? What if it's student council? What if it's math honor society? What if there are things that look so good on your resume, but you literally cannot go to because no one's gonna drive you. You live too far from school. I don't have enough money to take an Uber. There are so many substitutions that we can make. Have it online. Make it asynchronous. There's so many things we can do to allow students at lower socioeconomic dispositions to actually dream, to have that goal. You know what I mean? No one should ever be at a point in their life where they say, oh, I shouldn't be thinking of that. That's not set for me in my cards. That should never happen. This is America, this is Clackamas County, a place of privilege, you know? And if someone wants to dream, if someone wants to reach that higher strata of whatever, then they should.
Yeah. I'd like to bring it back to Samantha.
Okay, so, okay. One of the things going, like with the question of what improvements can be made in Clackamas, I think this could be said for a lot of places, but specifically in Clackamas, I think that it's really difficult for people to have conversations about race. They're terrified of it. And as somebody who recently had a teacher who tried to have a conversation about race, and the entire time you could tell she was panicked. She was scared about saying the wrong thing, and she was worried about what the reaction would be. We just have to start having conversations, because I feel like so many of the issues that people face stem from ignorance and people not being educated on just other people's lives and like the empathy aspect of just being able to take yourself out of what you live and just to understand that other people live through different things, and you don't have to live through those experiences to be accommodating. But you can't get there if you can't even talk about it. Like, it gets to the point where there are kids in school who are afraid to even say the word black, and they'll like whisper it under their breath because they're like afraid that it's a bad word. But then you're teaching them that it is a bad word. You're teaching them that this type of language is something that you should be afraid of. Someone's ethnicity or nationality should never be something that you should shy away from. It should be celebrated and it should be explored. And I think that the fact that we can't even have a conversation about race without there being constant terror and constant worry about, like, what if this person never speaks to me again because I said the wrong thing? Or even on the other side of that, where there are people that don't want to talk about race because in the past, they've just been shut down time and time again, or they are afraid of getting a negative reaction because if they open up about who they are and their experiences, they're going to be outcasted. And I know that there's a channel on YouTube called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, where he sits down with people. I see some people are familiar with it, where he sits down with people and he's like, I'm a black man. And I know that for some people, just saying that statement is scary, and I want to talk about that. And he sits down with so many different groups, and obviously that's not like we can do that exact same thing here, but just talking with people around you and opening up those conversations, but on a larger scale, making it so that faculty have conversations about race, even if there aren't people of color in the room, because you can never break down racism without the oppressors there. And I think that if we continue to try to separate and never open these conversations, it's only going to get worse. And I think that we have to force people to start having these conversations everywhere, otherwise nothing's going to change.
Okay, let's check out another question from the audience. Okay. So, I think this is probably more for the Clackamas students here, but how has the redistricting and the split of Nelson and Clack affected your experience of marginalized identities? And I'll speak for a quick minute here because I actually went to Nelson and then I transferred back to Clackamas for a lot of reasons. And I think one that's really clear, even though some people might not want to admit it, but the lines they drew over our district were very much reminiscent of redlining. My neighborhood is very white dominant. And the suburbs that a lot of my Clackamas friends come from are not as white dominant as mine is. Because, I drive people around, I see what the suburbs are like. And I know there's a distinct difference between Nelson and Clackamas' environment. And there is a reason why I was down to the point of crying almost every single day after being at Nelson. Yeah, Nelson has standing desks. Their desks are so much nicer to sit at Clackamas. I'll tell you that. Being at Clackamas means you're in a cramped spot. Nelson, you've got this whole thing and go up and down. And there's a reason I threw all of that away. Because when you hear kids shoving other kids of color and calling them gangsters, when you feel like that admin constantly shuts down your efforts for equity, when no one at your school even cares about equity and just cares about getting into the next Ivy League, you feel a certain way. And it's not a sense of belonging. And the rivalry that exists between Nelson and Clackamas now is not great. When I said I was going to transfer, people asked me why I was going back to the ghetto.
In Clackamas?
In Clackamas. No. I said I was going back to Clackamas High School, and they asked me why I was going back to the ghetto. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to open up back to our panel. I have a lot of hard feelings about that. Yeah, really.
That makes me so angry because it's you guys don't even know. It's Happy Valley. We live in the suburbs. We're in the suburbs. Y'all haven't seen the ghetto. Oh my god. But I think the thing with Nelson, I don't go there, obviously I go to Clackamas High School, but it's I've heard that you actually get made fun of if you hang out with other races. The friend groups are very race divided. And if you hang out with another race, you're looked down upon at Nelson. So I think that's just a little food for thought.
There's a very much person of color group and a very much not person of color group. And it goes to say, why does that exist at a high school? With children, yeah. What kind of culture is being perpetuated that even the children instill it in the ways they act?
So I have a lot of friends that go to Nelson, and my boyfriend who goes to Nelson. So every day I hear him talk about everything that happens there, and it's just devastating to hear the fact that they have mostly white teachers, and they had one Hispanic teacher who used to work at Clackamas and in the split moved to Nelson, and within a year she quit. Because there were students that after the hate crime would come into her classroom wearing MAGA things and would wear things that are affiliated with Trump and Blue Lives Matter, and would say things directly to her, knowing that hate crime that happened targeted her community. And it was too much for her. And then she was moved to Nelson, and it was amplified to the point where she just couldn't deal with it anymore. And she was a wonderful teacher, and she was young, and she was bringing so many innovations to math. And there were kids who I grew up with that hated math, but they had her as a teacher, and she brought back that love of learning, which I feel like school should be about.
Yes.
And they took that light and they put it out. And it's sad because Nelson has so many wonderful facilities, like their theater. They had someone who worked in Disney, the Disney company, build their theater. Where they got the funding for this, I don't know. Can we see this funding, please?
Adrian C. Nelson.
But there was so much funding that went into that school, but that funding is only now accessible to a very small community of students that is predominantly white, and it puts so many other students at an even lower position. And not to say that Clackamas High School doesn't also have a ton of privileges, because I think that we can all agree, like all of our high schools, there are a lot of things we have here that so many other schools would wish to have. And I don't ever want to ignore that fact. But just the fact that there are schools that are pushing these boundaries and are giving these wonderful opportunities, but it's not to everybody. And I feel like if we continue to separate people and we continue to put these people at an advantage, like you were talking about earlier with the technological advances, it's just going to make everything worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and that brings up a very good point too.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I was looking at the pictures Isabel sent me of Nelson, and like she isn't kidding about the sand dust. Like it's I went to okay, no, seriously, I went to a tech company's headquarters, and they have the same sand dust as they have at their school. And not only that, they have brand new Mac, they're not even the MacBooks, not even these that are $1,000. They have the $10,000 setups of the Mac. I literally dream of having that stuff. And it literally blows my mind. I thought I was, I am privileged, to be fair, but I never thought it was possible to have a tech company inside a school, but that's what they have right there, yeah.
We had the field. They
Yeah.
talked about maybe getting a swimming pool.
Because they have access to the athletic fields.
Yep. And
Yeah, anyway, I'll pass it on to Feel free to go.
I went to Happy Valley Middle School, and all my friends went to Nelson. And I knew Happy Valley Middle School was predominantly white, and I just didn't know why. Everyone was leaving me. I was like, why are you guys all leaving me? And then, so I still am in contact with a lot of them, and they definitely talk about Clackamas as if they're looking down on us. But it's very reminiscent of how I feel like a lot of Clackamas students view other school districts. I don't know if you guys know this, but we are nicknamed Crackamas, and David Douglas is Dirty Douglas, and Franklin is Freaky Franklin. But Nelson doesn't have anything. Nelson doesn't have anything. Nelson is pure and untouched, and I think that is just something that we have to think about, and we should all just be really grateful for the privileges that we have, and just that's something that us Clackamas kids have to think about too. That's a really harmful stigmatism that we're pushing, and we shouldn't just enforce that dogma, especially on other school districts as well. And I know my Nelson friends, they talk about Clackamas as if we have so many teen pregnancies and we're so drama ridden, and I'm I don't know where you're hearing these things, because Clackamas is a really great community overall, and so it's just crazy how there's I went to middle school with these people, and all of a sudden they're entitled to this level of privilege that I didn't know was different between me and them, and yeah, it's just been difficult navigating that now.
yeah, and I think with that, we're gonna move on to the next question. So, we've already talked about a lot of different locations, but I want our panelists to describe a place that you may have felt maybe welcomed, if you're feeling a little more on the positive side, or unwelcomed here in Clackamas County, and why. And what's one thing you do love about Clackamas County, and what's one thing that you wish was different?
It's kind of funny how we're all struggling to answer this, but I feel really welcomed at my bookkeeper's office. Her name is Miss Lee. She's also Vietnamese. Yeah, you guys know her. We all love Miss Lee. Every morning, she never fails to say Jiao Gong, which is a very nice endearment in Vietnamese. She makes everyone feels like family, no matter what their background is. And even to the white kids, she's really nice. And I do, but she's just nice to everyone. It's not she favors people of color. But her door is always open. If you say that you're hungry, she'll have food for you. And I think all teachers should strive to be like Miss Lee, because she's here for your club fees. She's here if you you need to pay something like a sports fee. But she's also here to talk to you. Like, she cares. She'll get you connected with the right people. I lost my AirPods once, and she went into school early and she scoured the school for them. But then she also told all my friends that I lost them, and then I got bullied about it for like the rest of the week. And then she also told all the staff to look out for a cute little black AirPod case that looks like a cat. And so all the staff members, I'm also friends with the custodian because I have connections with cafeteria and staff. So in the lunch lines, did you find your AirPods, Lydia? And then John is taking out the trash and he's like, looked in the trash, Lydia, your AirPods aren't in here. And I just feel really loved and appreciated there. And so, yeah, that's my favorite part about Clackamas. I did find them. The front lady found them, and it was because Jackie, who administers all our AP tests and SAT tests, she found them on top of a trash can. So, yeah, but I'm very grateful to have my AirPods back. It was a very sad week without my music, because I like to dance a little bit when I brush my teeth. It's a little pick-me-up in the morning, and I just didn't have that. But now I do, so.
Ready? Yeah.
I think I feel the same as Lydia. It's just in the classrooms and rooms of teachers who really try to understand us and who actually, we feel that they genuinely care about us. Teachers like Miss Lee, Miss Tumalad, Mr. Bailey. Teachers who actually, they're all people of color, they happen to be, but just people who genuinely care about their students and put in time outside of the classroom to ask if we're okay. And if I'm feeling down, they notice and they ask me about it. I think that's really important. Just in the school setting, it's just just teachers who care and who will actually stand up for us. I know some teachers, I have witnessed many teachers at Clackamas High School where some things would be said in the classroom, some slurs would be said, and the most they will say is, hey, don't say that. And then that's it. And it's they say all these things, they say they don't stand for racism, they say that they don't stand for homophobia, but when it comes to the time where we can actually do something, they don't. So I think it's just about being less performative and actually taking action.
Hey, come on, do that again. What was that?
Not being performative and taking action.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. And I think we can all agree when we say, our teachers of color are really, really important to us. They're the people who represent us. They're the people who understand what's going on. But it's also not fair to make our teachers of color shoulder that burden of being the teacher of color.
Okie dokie. In terms of welcoming and unwelcoming places in Clackamas County, I only have one place that comes to mind. Our ASB president is here. I love you, mwah. But the place is our student government. It's nothing with you. I love you more. So it's welcoming for me in a sense that in school, there's a place that I can go to, that I can sign up to be in, so that I can influence people in my school to be seen, to be heard, to enact programs and policies that puts them at the advantages in times and places where they have been put down time and time again. That was the way it was showcased to me, a spotlight of equity on this group of people. This is the circle where you can create change within your school, right? Because who would deny that? Who would deny that opportunity? You know what I mean? And I always envisioned student council, student government, to not be a group of hand-picked individuals that were the most talented, that were the smartest, that were the brightest. No, none of that. I didn't want student council to be the cream of the crop. I wanted it to be a direct representation of the student body, because who else would know what the student body needs than the students themselves, right? I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see, so I applied, right? Luckily enough for me, I became senior class president Yay. Like, that was great. I didn't expect that to happen. But the unwelcoming part of it was that I wished student council wasn't the cream of the crop, the best of the best. But that's what it kind of was. That's what it still kind of is, you know? There's a specific demographic in there called the Spirit Committee. And this is a group of people that they're all white, okay? Sorry, I don't want to be crass, but it's as if our teacher gave them every single project, every single initiative, every single movement in the school. Now, I represent a body of students who I wanted to give a voice to, queer students of color, right? But if I was in a room where I wanted to make change, yet no responsibility, no voice, not an ear was given to me and to the white students who do carry their weight, it's the principle of the thing. If everything was given to them, why am I here? You know what I mean? Am I a literal face of performatism? You know what I mean? That's why I for a hot minute, I was like, okay, I was shocked to see that, oh, is this the reality of Clackamas' Student Council? And then I went on to realize that it's not just Clackamas. It's probably every student government in every single school. Going back to what I was saying earlier, who is known to take the most AP classes? Who are known to take up the most extracurricular responsibilities? Probably white students. So why is this group of white students being given the voice? Why are they labeled as the face of the school? Because in a way, they were being made to be the representatives of what our school was. They were being enshrined to be the best of the best in Clackamas High School. And in doing that, not only are we misrepresenting the student body, but at the same time, we are allowing so many students to continue to be ignored, to continue to be repressed, and their voices not heard. That's the reason why I joined Student Council, so that maybe in 4 years, another gay Filipino freshman will come walking into the halls of Clackamas High School. And finally, in the beginning of the year, they'll be like, oh, no, I don't have to be afraid to join choir and theater. You know what I mean? I want that fear to be erased. I want opportunities opened. I want education at all levels in my school to be open and accessible for everyone. But at the center of it all, in our student government, if we're only giving responsibilities, if we're only shining a light onto the white students who do everything, we make them do everything, what is the point of representation? You know what I mean? I may not be the best academically. I may not be the best in taking on responsibilities and taking on goals. But entering student council, I believed that I had a voice. I was willing to use it, and I wanted to let so many other kids like me be seen and heard. To be refused of that was like I was stripped of all my purpose in that group of people. And being in a group where a lot of responsibility is held onto you and being stripped of that purpose, I felt like a nobody. For the longest time, I was so frustrated because yes, I was labeled as senior class president, but I felt like I was some statue of representation when behind me were all the other people appointed to do work, that I was just some symbolic face of inclusivity. And to some point, I still kind of am. I'm trying my best to be assertive, to insert not only my voice, but the voice of the students I represent. And we are trying to kind of reformat the way things are. I don't know if next year things will be different. But it's important to know that the welcomingness of a school and learning environment comes from the children and the students you choose to represent it. If we choose a group of outstanding students who yet don't fit the actual demographic of your population, you're choosing intelligent students, bright students, smart, talented. Okay, yeah, They're all those things. I'm not discrediting them whatsoever. But like I said earlier, we are doing a disservice to the rest of the school if all we are trying to portray to the rest of the world is that, oh, this is our student council, this is a direct representation of our school, talented, white, brilliant, when it's not. We are ignoring so many, we are leaving so many in the shadows, and we're only shining a light on a specific demographic. This is harmful. It closes doors, it encourages people to step back, to resign academically in their extracurriculars or whatever. And going forward, that's not a Clackamas County I want to see. That's not a Clackamas County anyone here wants to see. So hopefully, one day, when we talk about school, it is only known to be welcoming.
And I think it's also really important to note how a lot of our equity initiatives at our school are structured. A really important distinction Rafi made there is our spirit committee is mostly white students. So you can guess what our equity committee is mostly made of. I think my sophomore year I actually wanted to be part of the spirit committee, but I was told no. And I got put on the equity committee. I mean, yeah, it's awesome, look where I am now, but that's another thing. When we're pushing our students of color to constantly be at the front of those equity issues, what does it say about our student councils? What does it say about our student leaders? And I think that's another really, to answer one of the questions up there, a really important reason why we have our affinity groups and why we're trying to push our affinity groups to the center. But I'm going to have Rainey take it, who's also going to be president of our Asian Pacific Islander Student Union next year.
We have our current president right here, but I think, I forgot to mention this, but one of the spaces where I feel the most welcome and safe at school is our affinity groups. We have GSA, LSU, BSU, and APISU. I think that's all right. And APISU is our Asian Pacific Islander Student Union, Latinx Student Union, Black Student Union, and Gender, Sexuality, and Alliance.
And multicultural.
Oh yeah, and multicultural student union, those respectively. I think these spaces are the most welcoming spaces that we have in Clackamas High School, and I wish that every high school could have these affinity groups. I mean, so many of my best memories personally in high school have been during these meetings, and I think it's just a great way for people of color to just come together and feel welcome and feel like they don't have to hide who we are or what we have to say. And I think we also have done a few, when we have meetings together, that Isabel has organized, our equity meetings, where representatives from each club come together and discuss issues that we have in school. I think these meetings are so, so, so important in discussing our struggles together.
Yeah, for sure. Those equity meetings take a lot to organize. Some people may call it bribery. I call it incentivizing. One awesome thing that we have is that we have the funds to get snacks. Like Rafi and I will go to Safeway during our lunch break and pick up sodas and chips, and everyone's snacking on them during those meetings. But that goes to another really big privilege we have, is that we have funding. I have funding to incentivize my constituents to come to meetings with me. I have the privilege to have funding to even have those meetings, to be able to give people rights. But not a lot of schools have that funding for their affinity groups. And we're not just talking about high school, we're talking about middle school, we're even talking about elementary school. We don't just become people of color magically in high school. Being a person of color is ingrained ever since we've been born. And creating a safe space like that at all ages is really important. But we need the funding. Okay. So with that, does anyone? Oh, Maya.
I can keep on going with the original question. Okay. We good?
Yeah.
Okay. I had a really hard time with this question. We had talked about it in a meeting a few days ago, and I just kept on going out negative, and I don't want to just go in a negative light, but I will talk about it a little bit. So the places I feel welcome the most are communities that I have created, and groups that I have created, and friends that I have made, and spaces that I have made safe for myself and other people. Whether that's through an equity campaign or just through getting a group of friends together that you know are safe people, safe adults, safe teachers, because it's kind of what you have to do, because Sandy is very conservative, very white, and that kind of makes it hard, especially doing the equity work that I have the last few years. That's how I kind of go into where I felt unwelcome. I've hosted equity events. One was March 2020. It was called Have a Gay Day. It was awesome. But then we got a lot of backlash. We had Proud Boys show up, and they counter-protested across the street because of a local church called Rivers. I wrote it down because I wanted to say his name. Rivers of Living Water Pentecostal Church in Sandy. The pastor had asked them to come as his security. And then not too long after, he likes to post videos in the middle of the night of him preaching to himself on camera. It's kind of weird. He'll stand in the church and just scream, basically. And there was one about me, actually, because right after that event, I testified in front of city council. And it was right after I'd come out as bisexual, so it was very new, and I had made that very prevalent at the event. And he basically told me that I chose this life, I deserve opposition and hatred, basically. My mom was one who found that video, if that tells you anything. It was kind of a bad little situation. I still see him in town all the time. He knows my face. I know what he looks like. He's constantly having a little flag wave by himself at the Walgreens corner in Sandy. So if you ever see someone there with a little flag, that's who he is. And although it's scary at the time, it's also fueled me, not made me angry, it's fueled me to want to change that for other people of color, LGBTQ plus students that live specifically in Sandy or the county.
It's okay to be angry too.
Yeah.
You said something about the pastor saying you made the choice. And I just want to, sometimes I take long walks and I just talk to myself about gay. But going off of that, I always hear the term, you made the choice. And I respect institutions of religion because I grew up in them, right? I'm not gonna talk about what I believe in and what you should believe in, no. But what I will say is a fact that any member of the LGBTQ plus community never made a choice. I want to make that fundamentally clear. No queer person has ever sat in their room and said, hey, let me make a choice to make every single person, not every single person, but a majority of people in America hate me. Hey, let me make a choice to make my mother hate me. Let me make a choice to have hatred rain on me every single day. For a long period of my life, I tried to repress the gay. I tried to pray the gay away. I hated myself for it, high key. I hated it, right? But then I realized I didn't make this choice, okay? And knowing that, I need to stand with who I am. I shouldn't be hating on myself. No one should be hating on me. But if ever I hear someone, if I see that guy, if I hear anyone say, why did you make that choice? I'm gonna ask them that same question. Why do you think I chose for the world to hate? Because that is common sense. We are living in an America today where drag is being banned. Anything connected to the LGBTQ plus community, anything that involves our freedom of expression, the ways that we like to come together and personify our joy, it's being banned, it's being hated on. And we need to look at these institutions of drag, expression, any one of these things, and realize that it's not some satanic ritual. It is a way that we have coped for decades upon decades upon decades. The world thinks we've chosen to pray to Satan every night. We're not doing that. We are living our truth. And that's what we're doing. If you think drag is some stupid thing that is killing young children, no. It is a way that we, as a community, have expressed our plights, how we manage to cope through all this hatred, through all this discrimination and bigotry for how many decades on end. So if I ever hear anyone say, you made the choice, girl, it's over for you.
Okay, so really quickly, before I make my comment, I just want to say, I am so sorry that a fully grown adult is targeting a high schooler. Because in no world should that be something that happens or is accepted. Because as a fully grown adult, to target children, like I'm so sorry. So I guess just going back to the original question of where are places you feel welcome and things that you like and things you don't quite like about Clackamas, I just want to say first and foremost, Clackamas is a very privileged place. We've talked about this. I mean, we have libraries that have access to the internet and people can go there and print things and get access to food. Our schools have food drives where people can come over the summer to get meals. We have organic grocery stores. We have farmers markets that a lot of communities don't have. I mean, we have places where you can go bike and go hang out with your friends. We have parks. We have all of these great community places. And not to mention, we have schools like Adrian Nelson with all of these wonderful technology advancements, and there's so many things that we have access to in Clackamas that I think if the average person were to see, they would want that. Because who wouldn't? You know, who wouldn't want access to all of these things that would give you a step ahead in life and to give you some level of privilege? But something that I've noticed with my family is while we have access to these, it's not equal access. And when we walk into these spaces, all eyes sort of turn to us. And I remember as a kid, one of the first times I noticed this, I went to the store with my dad, and somebody was using coupons like Safeway, because they had like the whole Monopoly event, and they didn't want to use them. And so my dad was like, hey, is it okay if I take them if you're not going to use them? And then under their breath, they called him a slur, and so they didn't want to give it to him. And I was like in elementary school, I think, so I didn't quite understand what happened, but I could just see the look on my dad's face of just, everyone at the grocery store knows him. He'll walk in, they're like, hey, Lincoln, how are you doing today? But to walk into that space that otherwise had felt welcoming, and then to have that response, it's so disheartening. And then as a child, to look up to your parent and see that look of just fear wash over their face is awful. And it's so difficult to have access to these spaces but not really having access to them. And knowing that, my dad's talked about how part of the reason why everyone knows him at the grocery store is otherwise he'd be a threat. Because as a black man, that's what people view him as. And he'll walk into a store and he makes himself known. He will purposely go up to people and say, hey, I'm Lincoln, I work in the neighborhood, my kids go to school here. Even though he should never have to do that. He shouldn't have to give all this information just to walk into a store and feel safe. And he's even gone out of his way to meet with the police officers in the area so that he makes himself known so that if anything were to ever happen, nobody would target him. And I know that at one point, my brother, who suffers with really severe anxiety, was having a panic attack at work, and my dad went to go pick him up just to make sure that he was safe. And the Clackamas mall security guard stopped him and was like, whoa, what are you giving him? Are you trying to give him drugs? And my dad was like, no, this is medication from his doctor. And it's the fact that at every twist and turn, there's always some sort of opposition. As soon as we start to feel hey, I love going here, I get to go on walks, then you have this hit you. And then growing up in a mixed household, I see the other side of it where my mom will hear people say all these awful things around her and expect her not to say anything about it because she's white. But then she'll say, hey, my kids are black and my husband is black. Even if you aren't directly connected to people of color, but specifically if you are, that is awful, to go into these spaces and know that if you were with your family, you wouldn't be welcome, but because you're alone, suddenly you are. And that's something where I think that Clackamas County has so much potential to be a wonderful place, but it can't be a wonderful place if it's not wonderful for everybody.
Say that again.
And I think that it's just difficult to know that when I walk into school or when I walk into the grocery store, that at some point I stopped being just a little kid walking into a store and I was now a threat. Just because my skin got darker as I gotten older, or just because, you know, people will see me and they'll know, I don't know what you are, but you're not white, and that's a threat. And it's just scary to think that as a little kid, like, I didn't realize this because my parents did the best that they could to try to shelter me from it. But there's only so much they can do, because I know that when I was really, really little, I heard about the first time that my oldest brother had to deal with racism. He was in kindergarten, and he was invited to a birthday party, and then they found out that he was black. And so they uninvited him, and my dad had to sit down this kindergartner and explain, because my brother was like, well, if I can't go, it means I did something wrong. And my dad had to explain to this kindergartner, you didn't do anything. It's nothing that you did. You didn't say or do anything. It's not you. It's not your fault. But how do you take your child and sit them down when they're in kindergarten and explain to them, there are some people that just aren't going to like you and they aren't going to welcome you, but you can't internalize that. Because the moment that you internalize that and you stop living your life, you're letting them win. And sometimes the best thing that we can do as people of color is to live and to thrive despite what they say.
And I think there's a really important question that just went up. But guys, do you really think that our representatives listen to us? Do you feel like that happens? Look at their faces. Come on. Does anyone want to say it for us? Yeah. I like to say pictures says a lot more than just simple words do. And I hope their faces say a lot more than just their words. Our representatives need to step up. We're kids. We're high schoolers. Some of us barely just turned 18. Oh yeah, but these issues are not new. The fact that we have to talk about this, the fact that instead of like, you know, going out, maybe having a party or like doing other white kids do, we're sitting here and talking about this to you guys because our youth has been robbed from us. That instead of having parties and just doing normal teenage stuff, living the American teenage dream, we sit here and fight for these issues instead because our youth has been robbed from us. Yeah. Okay, Aiden. Last person to answer the question.
Yeah, I really empathize with your point of, it almost feels like your house is in Clackamas, but your home isn't. But yeah, it's like something I thought of. But so now I'm going to talk about bikes. Yeah, I mostly go home in Clackamas when I'm in Hidden Falls or like some trail park. Not only because I get to scare hikers while I'm biking with my like crappy $200 like mountain bike, but also it just feels like you're on top of the world, or I guess on top of a hill, but like on top of the world when you're biking down trails, and, I don't know. But once I'm biking back home, it feels like a different story. So I just want to get a raise of hands. So when you were driving here, or however you got here, did anyone see a bike when they were coming here? Okay, so how many saw, was that biker like some random kid in a mountain bike, or was it like one of those like hella dripped out, like shiny equipment bikers?
Yeah.
It's one of those, right? And there's like nothing wrong with that. Like, you know what? They're hardcore and they really love biking. But that's a symptom of how our like Clackamas' transportation's like layout is. It's fundamentally like the lowest common denominator for transportation is a car. Why is that? Like, why? It's to buy a car it takes like tens of thousands of dollars. Like it's crazy. Like I feel genuinely unsafe when I'm on Clackamas' bike
Yeah, and I think it also goes to say, who's more likely not to be able to afford a car? Who's more likely to need access to buses, bikes, alternative forms of transportation that are also better at combating climate change? Okay, so as we go down to our last 10 minutes, I think the real topic of discussion is like, what can we do? What do we need? Specifically, as one question up there is asking, do you think paid opportunities would help? So, since we only have 10 minutes left, I'd like to ask our panelists to give a really short, quick, maybe 1 minute response about how they feel about what needs to be done, and if they believe paid opportunities would be beneficial for them. All right, who wants to start?
I don't mind going first, but I don't know if paid opportunities would help. This experience has been really eye-opening to me, but like we mentioned in the beginning, it's amplifying those voices that aren't outspoken. And there are many people like us who are comfortable sitting in front of a panel, but I also know like a handful of my friends who go through the same thing that I do, who just don't have the confidence to come up here and sit. And I think it's more so educating us to really reach out to those students and say, hey, there are resources that can help you. And I want to be able to point my finger to a resource that will be able to help them and not point them to a counselor who's already booked like 2 months out in advance. So I think just hiring like 2 more full-time counselors at our school would make such a huge difference. And maybe like giving the counselor like a little bit of a talk about how different cultures and different perspectives might affect and shape outcomes.
Oh, a big talk. Yeah, a big training, required training. Anything else?
I think like what we're doing here right now is just like, in the workshop we did before, I loved it. I think informing people like us, or like people who like aren't as like, are like shyer than us, who don't want to come up to a panel, just educating them and letting them know, hey, you guys have this power. We have the power to make change. And I think paid opportunities kind of goes in hand with that. I think that if you allow people of color to have opportunities, like paid opportunities, it can let us have some like representation in certain spaces. So I guess it depends on what the opportunity is. But yeah.
I'm gonna be completely candid. Paid opportunities are like so slay. They're amazing. Okay. But I look at it as if, I don't want to say it's like a job, but society needs this, right? And if there's no other way to incentivize students like us to be here, then that is unfortunate. But coming here, this has opened my eyes to realize I don't need to be incentivized to come here to have these discussions. Maybe other students might need that little push. Here's the money, girl, come over. But once that we can kind of get through that transition into normalizing stuff like this, even if it is past a paywall at first, then I think we can continue extremely important discussions like these. I think having students be paid to do this could kind of be like weird sometimes, but in the future, this is a foundation. We are setting a precedent to create change in our society, to further discussions, to create safer environments. And that's going to require a lot of resources, right? Not even just monetary resources. Time, transportation, venues. But once we have that locked down, checked, then it doesn't have to be an extracurricular anymore. We can transform it into school-sanctioned activities. We can extend it into workplaces. And that's going to take money. Paid opportunities now, it's great. It gives a high schooler some allowance to go out and get food and clothes. But the bigger picture here is that we are funding a movement to combat every single racist, bigoted policy that our government has ever established. And I think no matter how much we will spend and how much we are spending, it will be worth it.
Also, sorry, just a quick point. You also reminded me because I think paid opportunities is also great because I think time is money, and some students don't have the privilege of coming to these conventions without being incentivized, like paid. Maybe you could call it bribing, but I think time is a privilege, and some students, instead of going, like spending all day here, they could be working and getting money instead. So I think it's a really good opportunity.
Okay. I had some points written down to motivate other students, but it falls for this. Communication, education, radicalization. Some people are afraid of that word. I'm not. Things like this can radicalize our youth in a way that is positive and that can change the future and how we view things like this, conversations like this. And kind of with the compensation, I took the day off of work to be here. So I am willing to, I don't always have the time to not go to work and not make money, so it does help out, but it also shouldn't be what's encouraging you to be here and talk. I would be here if I would no matter what, kind of. So it's kind of finding the students that may need extra support, but also still have that passion to do things like this.
I think that it's a difficult line, we've kind of established that I think that paying can be a good incentive, way to incentivize people to come, as you guys were saying, time is money, but also I think from the perspective of my dad, where he works at T-Mobile, he has sort of been appointed as the person of color that talks about people of color issues, but he doesn't get paid to do any of that. But they expect him to take time out of his work week to come up with all of these panels and all these conversations and to be the face, but they aren't going to compensate him for it. So they're making him not only lay the foundation, but then build the house. And he doesn't get paid for it. And not only does he not get paid, he's now taking those work hours and putting that towards building this foundation. And there's almost a level of he is a face for this, not because he chose to be, but because he was chosen to be. And it's difficult to say that that's sort of a reality, that in corporate America, that it's just expected that if you are a person of color, you are inherently now the face of whatever department you're a part of just because of the fact that you look a specific way. And so I think that it's important to instill in youth the idea that you are worth something and that we will pay you for this because we understand that you should never be expected to be an advocate. You are a student like anybody else. You're just a kid. So if you're choosing to take the time out of your day and you're choosing to open yourself up emotionally, you should be compensated for that. And I think that that builds back up their worth that over generations has been deteriorated. And it goes back to the fact that a lot of us, our ancestors were dehumanized and were taught that you are expected to do all of this labor and you should be grateful that we're giving you this opportunity to do these things, but we're not going to compensate you for it. And I think that we have to build a mindset into our youth that you are worth it and we are going to pay you because we see that.
I completely agree. Yeah. I guess maybe to the viewers or whatever, but well, even if we're not paid, we're still gonna show up, right? We're still out here trying to make change, trying to do all these things, and yes, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
I want to add to this time is money thing, and knowledge is power as time is money. When you give students money to do all of this, you're unlocking a bunch of opportunities that they may have not been able to do before. Like, before I went into the work of equity, my mom wanted me to get a job so I could work and start, saving up for college tuition. But because I made the leap and joined a couple of equity organizations, I'm actually able to make money, save for my college tuition, and still be able to get to do all of this. Paid opportunities make students feel valued. Paid opportunities are valuable because this work, it takes a lot. It's not easy to just come up in front of a bunch of people you've never met before and just, spill out every single thing that's happened in all of your life stories. Maybe I've done it a little too much, but it's not easy. And we shouldn't act like it's easy. So, with that, I want a big round of applause for our panelists. And I just want to say, as that little Indonesian kid whose only representation was Dora the Explorer back then, I want to say thank you for coming. And I hope this inspires you. I hope you listen to these people, my friends, and realize, yeah, change can happen. But it takes all of us. And we students, we're here. We're ready to fight. But we need you guys to come up and help us take the lead. So again, thank you for coming today.
All right, I want to close things out. First things first, I want to take this moment to honor all of you guys. It's big of you to step up and share your stories of courage and bravery. It's amazing. You also make someone like me proud to be a young group of people who are standing up and fighting for something that I too, and I'm sure many others in here, have also had to deal with. So once again, let's give them a big round of applause for that. Thank you very much. This is a very bright, young panel here. It's amazing to hear them speak so eloquently about their experiences, and be so vulnerable in this. So again, I can't thank you enough. Thank you to everyone that watched online. Thank you for all the questions that came through. Great job on taking care of things. You did amazing. I was like, well, you go, girl. Let me go over here and stand to the side. I don't need to do anything. Yes, and thank you for your meetings and things that you do of bringing groups together from different organizations. So, absolutely incredible. I want to thank Step Up Clackamas. Let's give them a round of applause for this. Ms. Blackwell, great job. Joy as well. Andres,
Yes.
would you like to step up and say something, please?
And Kanya, Mira. Yes. Kanya running the slide up there. Kanya, come down here. Come on down here. Yeah, I'm just so grateful for all of this. Thank you all. We have been working on the research justice study in Clackamas County. So if y'all haven't heard much, this is going to be a part. You're going to hear a lot of these voices, a lot of these truths. The commissioners are going to see all this information about what needs to change. And we have a lot more going on, so you can learn more about the study. Just feel free to ask us. But I just wanted to say thank you. And then, Mira, do you want to say anything? Say hello.
Hi. Just so grateful for you all. Again, this was this was a vision that started almost a year ago, and it was several of the folks up here that really had this vision, and now it's a reality, and it's incredible. And just to see all of y'all here, and I heard all the snaps, and it was amazing. So thank you. And to our team, the three of us, we're a small team, and we worked really a lot of hours to do this, so I just wanted to shout out to you and especially you. So I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thank you, girl. It was a labor of love. And lots of meetings. Yeah, I'll be really quick. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, panelists, for showing up. This is like a part of like our research study, but I really hope that this doesn't end here and that this event kind of continues. The name is not copyrighted. You can continue it. It will not be me. But I hope that this like becomes like an annual thing in the future, and that we all gather again next year. Okay. Yes.
This event would absolutely not have been possible without Heidi over here. Heidi has been our rock and our like, did you do this? Did you buy this? Have you thought about this? I'm just like so grateful for you. And thank you, Casey, so much for your support. And Martine, where's Martine? I know I saw Martine. Martine from the Office of Inclusion of the county. You have been our support along with Cece over here at the office. We have had so many meetings for the past 2.5 to 3 years about all of this, and so you all are so special to us. Thank you. And one more person, Donisha over here from Clackamas Educational Services District. Also was instrumental in a lot of making this happen, so thank you so much for your support.
Take food, take flowers, please. Everything's gotta go. So take it on your way out, please.
All right, with that.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Hope to see you all next year. Let's triple this quantity.